Like faking money is not a concept that's new. It's just technology has advanced so that the ruse is even greater than it was before, effectively. I look at this as really a modality of control at all levels. Here is a perfect technological construction of a finite, fungible, transactable, permissionless, trustless store of value. Use with it what you will, humans.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Hey everyone, quick thing before we start. Over 50,000 of you keep coming back to watch and listen to this podcast, but over 65% of you still haven't subscribed yet. So here's my simple ask. If you find value in my Bitcoin content and you enjoy what I'm doing, please take a second to hit subscribe on YouTube or follow me on your go-to podcasting app. It's a small action that really helps push my content through the algorithm, and this way we can make sure that more people learn about Bitcoin. Thanks for being part of this journey. Now let's dive into this episode. All right, Chris Sullivan, welcome to Bitcoin for Millennials.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Brom.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, man. I've seen a few podcasts where you were the guest, and you've, I think, blew my mind several times with your knowledge about, history of economics, central banks, etc. And I think one of the reasons I started this podcast is that I see that my generation has no clue about the problem that they are experiencing. So it's also really hard for them to see Bitcoin as a solution to that problem. So I think you are the perfect guest to highlight some of the things that I think not that many people know and that I personally only learned about like in the past two, 3 years. So I'm super excited to chat. And I wanted to start with, on the website of your asset management firm, you have a quote by Friedrich Hayek, and I think it's from the 70s. So I think that's interesting because
70.
I'm gonna read it out, but it could have well just be said like yesterday, I think. So I think it's interesting that this is like over 50 years old. He says, "Money which is current only because people have been forced to accept it is wholly different from money that has come to be accepted because people trust the issuer to keep it stable. If we want free enterprise and the market economy to survive, we have no choice but to replace government currency monopoly and national currency systems by free competition between private banks of issue." Understanding what this means has, as I said, only come to me in recent years and in a later stage of my Bitcoin journey. I did not understand money at all, the issuance, the value, all these things. And I wanted to start with this question. Why is it that we are so enchanted by this false understanding or lack of money?
That's a huge thing to unpack, Brom. Thanks for kicking it off in a spicy way. There's my subjective answer, and then there's the objective answer. The objective answer is that really from 1920 on, and really you could cite World War I as maybe the beginning instance of this, you had concerted effort to destroy history from every aspect: written word, real estate, architecture, systems, personas, etc. And then you had a takeover of the education system of the West, very famously by the Rockefeller Foundation. So it is purposely opaque, right? Where you're, a couple thousand years ago, a merchant selling deer skins, right, or trading furs in, northern Canada, right? They actually understood what value was and what they were willing to trade their labor, service, product for real time. Whereas people have had a multi-angle, multifaceted depletion of mental resources, physical resources, and then monetary resources. And largely because if you look at the curriculum, especially the Common Core curriculum in the United States, I know Germany at least used to be huge with engineering and was a major manufacturing center of the planet. World War I, World War II were to destroy that. That was part of the agenda, right? So I'm not up to speed on that, but my family does support a charter school here in Florida, and we select the coursework. And there's no money, credit, and banking course, like even balance a checkbook. You go to a major university, they don't teach you how to do any of that stuff either. Mm-hmm. Now, my personal view is that the why and the cause are a much darker story. It's really you get to metaphysical and spiritual level of control. There's a few books that are hard to find that discuss like the Babylonian money magic, right? Because this is not a concept, like faking money is not a concept that's new. It's just technology has advanced so that the ruse is even greater than it was before, effectively. So I look at this as really a modality of control at all levels. And, then you can get into kind of the health stuff and the frequency manipulation of the planet through various means, the food production, poisoning, all of that is trickle down from this.
Thinking about if we should take that exit, but because I think I agree, all these things are connected. I think we'll stay with the money because I think also one of the things that I've learned and I think makes a lot of sense is everything you would ever want to fix in the world is broken because the money is broken, right? Like the way we exchange value with each other, basically also communicate value with each other, it is what creates the incentives to the level of value that we are exchanging with each other. And so if you have a money that's broken or gets devalued all the time, the incentive to create value also goes down, and that permeates into like all these different facets or elements.
You're right. It's both the systems and the apparatus of the money itself. But the two need to be fixed, right? Sound money over time will fix broken systems, but systems also are purposely disaligning incentives, right? Like the entire quasi-communist capitalistic structure, the globalist system, let's just use that easy term, is all FUBAR with incentives, right? Effectively, they can launder money at will too, on top of that. So you really don't have a checks and balances that naturally would be the end product of a properly set up system. And then obviously it's further corrupted by unsound money. And really it's a weapon.
Yeah.
It's a weapon of mass destruction, a weapon of mass dilution, right? It contributes to conditions such as mass formation psychosis. And then more prominently, in my opinion, that people aren't that conscious of is Stockholm syndrome. Like you have this weird, I don't, but people have this weird inherent bias to their home currency, which on no chart going back through any point in time, does it look like it's a good thing to bet on your sovereign currency? So I think it's the only important conversation.
Yeah.
Because it curtails spirituality, it curtails peace, it curtails prosperity. It is interwoven into everything. And the only way the globe think about world war, right? That is such a fucking insane concept that people would want to battle each other at a global level, right? It
at the
only
same point in time also.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like that's just not feasible. And that's why it's the only time it's ever happened. And then the Second World War was because they wanted to, they did so well in World War I, they wanted to do it again, right? And pulverize humanity for all of time. And they're a few clicks away from getting there, right? Like right now, we've got a little bit of a battle, a kind of, I guess, reflection back, or at least a little bit of resistance against the globalist, but Romania is a good example where they just took over again. NATO just went in, oh, you elected a, centrist or whatever you want to call the nationalist view. And then the people were deprived of that option real time. So you can't even get to the point where you recognize sovereignty in a bottoms up level without fixing the monetary system.
Bitcoin custody is evolving. And while self-custody is important, it has its own risks and trade-offs. OnRamp is pioneering a new standard, multi-institution custody, which eliminates single points of failure, adding fault tolerance and redundancy to your custody setup.
OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a segregated cold storage multi-signature vault, guarded by 3 independent institutional-grade custodians, none of which have unilateral control. Your funds are fully auditable on-chain, cannot be rehypothecated, and can only move or withdrawn at your explicit direction. Multi-institution custody removes the technical, mental, and physical burdens of private key management, providing unparalleled peace of mind for you and your loved ones. Bitcoin is money, and as the price continues to appreciate, OnRamp helps you seamlessly tap into financial services like trading, inheritance, insurance, loans, IRAs, and more, all without compromising on security or accessibility. Check out onrampbitcoin.com through the link below and schedule a consultation with the OnRamp team to get to know them and learn more about their offering.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's good because that's a nice leeway to Bitcoin, and we'll get there in a minute. I wanted to also ask you, because I like this term of forced, right? Like we are forced to use the currency of the country that we live in. And sometimes I ask people like, hey, can you remember when you agreed to using this money, right? Or even another question is like, do you remember when you agreed to pay taxes? As in, conceptually, I don't think taxes would be bad, but, just paying them, assuming that they will be, that revenue will be spent in a good way is just, kind of naive. But the fact that you are forced to use a currency that other people control to spend your time and energy to get rewarded in that currency, like that conceptually I now see and I think is not great. Like that is probably the worst trade that you can ever make in your life, right? Like exchanging your finite time and energy for something that other people can create infinitely. Like that is the dumbest trade that we can do. We still do it. But Hayek here also talks about trust, right? And what is the difference, or maybe we can talk about that. What would be the difference between money that's accepted due to force, like fiat money, versus money that can be accepted because you can trust it, like Bitcoin, or rather, Bitcoin is trustless. We don't have to trust any humans that participate in the Bitcoin monetary system. So,
I think that what he's alluding to is that you could replace the word trust for just freedom of choice.
Yeah.
Right. Because all value is subjective. So the instrument that you're using to make your labor interchangeable, right? Right. Because money is effectively just an interchangeable good unit of labor. That's just decided upon, right? So whether that's a seashell, a bar of gold, or a Satoshi, it's up for humans to decide ultimately. So I think where people are kind of sitting now, unfortunately, is that except for the maybe 2.5% of the population that has awoken to this knowledge again, right? Because the Austrians wrote all of this stuff from the 40s to the 70s, right? Whether it's Murray Rothbard or it's Frederick Hayek, those concepts aren't new. That you go to 1690 to John Locke, right?
Wow.
And before, so you really, this isn't something that's why I want to make people understand. While the technocratic version of communism, which we have globally, is somewhat new just because of the technological apparatus, the control mechanism is not new. Right? Even Rome.
Yeah.
At this point, it's 2,000 years ago where it started to decline. They corrupted the coinage, which is exactly what England did in the 1680s. So I think that these concepts and these realities are not new, and people have this default setting to where they believe the euro or the yen or the dollar or the sterling is the trusted instrument because that's what they have experience doing. I still talk to people today. They neither have gold nor Bitcoin. Bitcoin's 101,000 today, and you still have not had a collision with giant pools of capital globally. Now, to me, that's hilarious and an epic opportunity for those of us who have patience. But it's also like I'm frustrated on what it's going to take for people to get out of their own way. Now, we have had the Great Reset bullshit, the COVID bullshit, the World War III bullshit. People have been pulverized and fear-mongered into, effectively mental poverty. So we can give them a little bit of a pass. But at the same time, like this is so obvious that the only reason I'm taking out time to do things like this is to help bring people across the finish line. Mentally at first, at least.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that, because I've talked about this a lot. I just mentioned before your episode on Breedlove, I was talking with Breedlove, and we talked about the spiritual angle, and it gets spiritual, in my opinion, really quick, because as what you just said, there is no thinking about this. Mm-hmm. So there's like a blind acceptance of some sort of abstraction of your time and energy that you use to exchange value for like other time and energy. Eventually, everything costs energy to create or maintain. So it's like an abstraction of that. But yeah, there's a third party. We might feel that we have a free transaction if you offer something and I say, oh, okay, for those amount of dollar units, I would like to, buy that service or product from you, and we shake hands and we feel like we did that in total freedom. But there's a third party that influences the reward that we exchange or that I give to you, right? And just that thought is something that I think not many people think about.
Well, I think you need to even dilute it further. There's a third party, right, which is the middleman of that transaction, whether
also, yeah, okay,
right,
yeah.
right. Then there's the fourth party, which is the sovereignty that governs the regulatory apparatus around that. And then there's the fifth, which is the central bank itself.
Yeah.
Which permanently dilutes. So it is complex and dynamic, but the concept of many hands in the pot should be easy for those.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that's eventually also my goal with the podcast is like, okay, how can we break this down simply? Because people are not going to read John Locke, right? Or,
honestly, then they don't deserve it. You can't just listen to some Yahoo from Florida that happens to have all these degrees and charters and this and that, and has devoted my entire life to this stuff. But you need to learn for yourself. There's a reason that great men wrote great things, and these echo into eternity, right? And you can go to Christ, you can go to the Gandhi. There's so many different figures that have said the same things in different ways over and over and over again, and it is up to humanity to embrace them from a bottom-up, roots-based uprising.
I agree, because that's the other thing I wanted to say with what you just mentioned. Like you said, this is not new. And whenever I hear something like that and I think about, okay, I just wrote a quote from 50 years ago that could have been said yesterday. We are so far away from where we could be, and that is, again, why it makes it so spiritual for me, because we are so far away from what we all could do together, and nobody really has time. Because everyone is just, like on the hamster wheel. You don't have time to reflect on this, to think about this.
And that's purposeful. Right. Yeah. I mean, I make time. I read voraciously because that's just kind of my pastime. And what intrigues me and what really dove me in is when I was doing master's work in history at Emory University, I just happened to be turned on to the right things to read, which was effectively the curriculum of what the forefathers of America read, to formulate their opinions, because it was just fascinating to me that Jefferson and Adams and Franklin, like Jefferson's 32 at the time, I think John Adams is like a few years older, and they just thought, oh, we're going to take on the British Empire. And what would have given them the faith and the hope and the strength to do that? And it was works like John Locke and Adam Smith. And Wealth of Nations is like it was written. It's like, to me, it's as important as any scripture by Adam Smith, and then you have Robespierre and and the great French writers also that during the First and Second French Revolution that were reiterating the ideas from Locke and Adams, and then you had them effectively reiterated by the forefathers in 1770s. So it's again not new. Andrew Jackson then 1840s, 1860s reiterated it, and then the Austrians, 1940s, 1970s, and then Bitcoin's now effectively the weapon to combat this.
Yeah.
Instead of going to war, because these people, there's 4,000 of them, right? Globally, we'd kick their ass in 5 seconds, but they're not going to face us physically.
Yeah, that's so crazy, because I'm thinking, I wanted to ask you, like, are there any historical examples where money was accepted due to trust rather than force? Yeah, and so I'm also thinking, if you give people the freedom, the general environment or the society would probably be way better, because you feel like you are entrusted with making your own decisions. You can say, like, I don't want well, maybe not a cow for, whatever, bread, or, whatever people think of as money, and someone else comes up with, hey, but maybe this is a better way to trade. Like, that is an organic way to together discover what do we actually value, what can we trust, based
and
upon
that's
the
how a
properties.
free market capitalistic system works.
Yeah.
Where, right, you have price discovery, you have truth discovery, and they're simultaneously the same thing.
Yeah. Is that the core for you also of, like, Austrian economics? That's how I understand it. Like, it's just like, okay, let it be free, and it's like it's like a social experiment, and I do it too short, but we figure it out together, basically.
So the Austrians, it's not even like Austrian economics, right? Because then it puts it in the realm of the theoretical, right? Mm-hmm. Now, economics in general is a theoretical science. It's not an actual science, right? What they're really saying, though, is the state of nature. The state of nature is free market capitalism.
Yes.
The corruption of it is this fascist communist hybrid, right? Which is what we have now. And Bolshevism effectively was rolled out once they had modernized the central banks, effectively in Bavaria and in England. So that effectively, we have Bolshevism across the whole planet. And there's only 6, 7 countries that don't have these Rothschild central banks.
6 of 7 have been in war, right?
Well, I mean, Syria just went the way of that just now.
Yeah. So what are these historical examples? Do you have, like, something that...
Yeah, the Pacific Islanders is a great one, right? Their mode of transacting were seashells.
Yeah.
And then you look, okay, why? Well, you had to dive in tropical waters to retrieve the shells, which risked shark attack, drowning, weather. So they just agreed that was the way they would transact. In Africa, there was beads. And then they were famously counterfeited by the Belgians. So, you've got, when you're, I think, localized, you've got a higher chance of being bottom up. And most people don't want paper, right? Because paper is effectively a contract, which is then a derivative of the good or service, right? So I think when you look throughout all of history, it's some sort of physical commodity.
Something for which energy has to be expended to some degree.
Risk has to be taken.
Yes.
Et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And it makes total sense, right? Again, like, this, it's just a rational thought. Like, if I buy something from you for which you've expended energy, then I have to pay you with something that in a natural way also represents some sort of energy. I like that concept, right?
Yeah.
Because then
it's like
it's
saying
like
the time value of time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what are now, so we live in this totally different system than where we could be. Hopefully we'll get back to that again. I think we'll get to Bitcoin, but I want to kind of, like, zoom in on what are now then, like, the mechanisms that central banks use to control. You just mentioned also property rights. I think that comes up a lot. Owning something versus it actually being your property. I also find that interesting, like, those differences. Why are property rights so important?
That's what creates peace, right? You can't have peace without property rights.
Can you elaborate?
Yeah, I mean, in individual rights, quote unquote civil rights, all stem from property rights. Property rights are personal sovereignty secures, right? And effectively, taxation on property makes it so that you don't own your land. So blanket against. I'm against taxation anyway. So there's no need for governments. You can finance everything in America, for example, was built before there was taxation. All of the road systems, all of the dams, all of that. Like taxation is just another weapon against the population. So I think, what is it, Walden Pond, like neighbors need fences, right? That's a very artful way of describing the state of nature that requires property rights. And property rights are inherent to a peaceful state of nature. And they're also really important for sound economic system. And then to build and transfer wealth, which is the only reason to live, really, right? Like you're having a second child. I have 2 kids. What is your goal as a father? It's to make your children's lives easier than you and to have them have more opportunity than you. Well, because our benchmark is this fiat, whatever the hell, because we have to devote so much of our lives to doing that, we need more of it so that our kids have more time than we had, effectively, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you lose a lot of that power of transfer when you have no property rights. And then same thing with state taxes. That's insane. You shouldn't have to pay tax on transferring anything to your heirs. All of this is just a byproduct of the central bank system. As soon as you get the Federal Reserve Act, 15, 20 years later, you get income tax.
While you're talking, I'm thinking about it, and maybe this is overly simplistic, but this is sometimes where I end up. You mentioned the fence and the neighbors. They would probably build that fence together, right? Because they respect both of their properties, right? And they would say like, oh, there's a line in between. We make this fence together. In a general society that thinks that way, it would be like, hey, I respect your craft, you respect my craft. We build something together. We get rewarded based on the merit, etc. That's all sounds so like positive and inviting to me that I feel that the fact that that is so hijacked, and again we go back to the spiritual part, that is done by weak minds. That's what I think then, right? Like it's about like
by weak cowards.
Isn't that what Ayn Rand says about the people that actually do work pay taxes to the people that don't expend any energy or something like that? I don't know. I'm butchering the quote, but yeah, it feels like that. Like there is a system that does not reward being inventive or honest or value things as they should be valued in a consensus way, etc. Yeah, or is that overly simplistic? Like that sounds like like a utopia. Like, oh, everyone's happy and doing their thing, but
no,
that feels very human.
You could interchange the word logic there for happy, because when we're using logic, we're not really arriving at a subjective emotion, yes, right? Yeah. We're just arriving at a logical state of nature.
Yeah,
where inherently humans actually have 95% of all humans are sweethearts, right? You've got certain sects of whatever radicals, but most people will respect boundaries. Most people have good manners across the planet. I've traveled all over the planet, right? Certain cultures are better at it than others, right? And if we were to just decide one day that, all right, we're not going to participate in the central banking system, there wouldn't be one.
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah.
There would not be proxy wars. There really wouldn't even be standing armies.
Yeah. So what I also find interesting is that this approach to money, the coin clipping, the more issuance and all these things, it never works, right? It always ends to some degree. And you see different things happening in societies that are, let's say, on the way to the end. How do you see the things that are evolving now in a historical perspective? Like, are there any, do we end up at Roman Empire? If I ask like, oh, could you give me an example? Is it just that similar? Or are there any others as well?
Rome was a lot more productive and a lot better for people than this system.
Wow. Okay.
Infinitely better. Slaves had more rights than we have.
How would you explain that?
What do you mean? It's black and white. Like if you extrapolate the actual state and condition we are in, whether you're in Western Europe or you're in the United States or in Japan, we are slaves in all forms. You don't own property. You have no legal rights to any of your property, your securities. You don't own your bank account. And you're part of a debt slavery system. You have no political will. You don't get to decide what your government spends money on. And you don't get to decide which NGOs have this multicultural agenda or make you borderless or destroy your food supply because they subsidize corn versus not subsidize, letting little farms compete. Because, dude, in 1929, one of the main reasons people didn't starve to death during the Great Depression, which was a decade and a half long, was because 44% of America was small farms.
That's interesting.
No one went hungry, right?
Yeah.
If you have your Bitcoin in self-custody, where are you keeping your Bitcoin seed words? For me, there's only one way, and that's backing up my seed phrase with stamp seed. It's a single durable plate without any parts or materials. Stamp your words into solid titanium, which is fire-resistant, water-resistant, and built to last. Unlike etching or engraving, stamp seed's patented tools help you to deeply stamp every letter for permanent readability, making it easy for you to protect your generational wealth. Don't risk losing your seed phrase on paper. Get a stamp seed plate for unmatched protection. You can use code BRAM, that's BRAM, for 15% off at stampseed.com.
Yeah. I read even way back, I want to say, I want to be correct, but I think it's like early 1800s, like 90% of people farmed in the US. I'm butchering the date.
I think it's 91, I think is the exact number.
Something like that. And only 9% of people had like a different job than food. Basically.
Well, and if you look at the migrations at that time, you had both Chinese, Irish, and German, and they were all ag migrations. So naturally, those people were already coming to America with skills, and America has very, very fruitful land.
Yeah.
So I think it's a function of two things: very decentralized systems in America at that time, and so you kind of had to be able to farm at least a few things, and then you had a huge plot of land that you were basically given for 10 cents, and you could do whatever you wanted. That was the reason we had the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, that is so fascinating for me from my understanding about the starting ideas of America. You just mentioned decentralization. I think that was a core part of the concept of America. That's also what created this freedom, or what you said, well, for a few cents you have the land, like please add to this, nation together. I think that was basically the invitation.
Yeah, I think the main premise first was rights are inherent.
Yes.
Right. That was the first thing, is that no sovereign, no king, no patriarch, no system gives you rights. You're born with rights. Yeah. These are endowed by the creator. Right. And then the second is that decentralization is essential. The web of the Constitution, it purposely designs a broken system with the tricameral system so that government can't harm the citizens. And it's not what the government can limit the people to do. It's what the government's limited by the people. And effectively, if those men were alive at any point of the last 50 years, they would have revolted in the very same way that they did.
Is this why at that moment in time that idea was also so radical as compared to like other parts of the world? This kind of like ultimate kind of call for or invitation to freedom?
No, the New Testament says your rights are inherent too. Then you had Plato before that. So the thought that human beings have natural rights is not new to Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, James Madison, John Hancock, etc. But I think it was the first time in a while it had been reiterated, really, since the French Revolution.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Yeah.
And I think it was the most successful reiteration, obviously, because America is the beacon of the planet. We're a shadow of what we once were, but Trump's about to get brought in, and this looks like it could be very favorable for the American people with the type of men and women that are going to be included. I mean, I think this is the first time you've seen Democrats come across, and then you have libertarians that are labeled as Republicans that are now anarchists. You know, you have a nice blend of people that are under one umbrella that are just going to be very disruptive. But I'm very happy that we're even having this dialogue, Bram, because by putting this out there, we're literally raising the consciousness of the earth.
Yeah, and I think what you can teach me, and I'm thinking about the YouTube comments like, oh, Bram is not smart enough for this. Like,
Smart's a relative term too, man.
Yeah, true. No, I'm more thinking like I don't have that that history experience that you have, but I thinking like my goal and understanding is I want to go back to like the rational thoughts, right? Like that we just said. Like if an idea is just good, you should do it, right? It's also something I don't understand in general, like all over the world. Like you can steal good ideas and put them together, you know. And why I just started with, you know, wasn't that the idea of, and my understanding of the start of America is like when I think about that idea, I think that's a damn good idea. Like,
yeah, people should really read the Articles of Confederation, which predated the Constitution, and it you know, that's why like the cypherpunks Satoshi Nakamoto had such an easy way to affect what Hayek was alluding to, because you already had beautifully written. In fact, I think the Articles of Confederation should be the governing document of Earth, so to speak. Not that we should have a new world order, global, you know, empire, but you know what I mean. Because with decentralization, you put a giant limit to the infringements of rights, innovations, creativity, harmony on the population.
Yeah, and I think that invites the creativity and the invitation to add value in whatever way, like for whatever you are here, right? Like it doesn't matter what do you do, but it feels like that could be, I don't like the term, but like a level playing field where anyone can do anything. There is no advantage to any player, basically. And I think that's the beauty of Bitcoin, right? It goes from zero-sum game to mutually beneficial game.
But you have to have the willingness and sponsorship of the population, right?
Yeah.
What they've succeeded at, which is a travesty, is that people now use their iPhone or their whatever the hell phone as a friend, and it solves for this human communication, right? So when someone can be lonely, but then not feel lonely because of their machine. And then they've really droned out people with bread and circuses. That's a Roman reference, right? With Netflix and Hulu and all the streaming, which is like, you know, we're not going to make you pay for HBO anymore. We're going to just give you this giant apparatus in many different versions so that we can still make money, and drone you out so you don't pay attention. And then we're going to ban and eliminate all of the books that tell the truth. And you're not going to know what questions to even ask by the time we get through for you. Like, people don't even know the history of the pharmaceutical system. They don't know the change of music and the literal tuning of frequency that changed. There's so many of these aspects that have been weaponized against humanity that people need to take the red and the orange pill and wake up. And only those that do that will deserve.
I think that's a good bridge to Bitcoin, because we mentioned let's call it grassroots uprising, right? This is I don't want to say random idea, but it's an idea that was released on a random forum, you know, on the internet 15, 16 years ago, which is still surviving to this day, which, again, rational thought should show you that it has merit, that there is value, that it has... It has survived, so to say, right? I always think like there's an infinite amount of ideas at any moment in the entire universe or talked about online, right? And so if you think about 15 years later, this thing still has a presence in the world, right? That just have a rational thought, like that should show you something. And you see that it's growing, and it's really bottoms up, like a grassroots revolution, I would say. And I like how Jeff Booth explains, like, you can basically just move to another system, right? That's why it's hard to understand, because it's a totally different thing. But yeah, you can move if you want to, And so I love the idea of Bitcoin being like a mirror, just because it exists, right? And it has different principles and different values. And once you understand that it's just numbers and letters, and that it can never ever disappear, that the values and the principles that come from Bitcoin, will have a presence in the world, right? So it acts as a mirror for all this other stuff that we just talked about. And so more and more people will see that there is this other system.
Yeah, I mean, it's catnip for the truth, effectively. It's catnip for the truth. Right?
Yes, I would agree. Yeah.
Once you take the orange pill, you will likely, not far long from that period, understand that the concept of modern warfare, right? Not like, hey, Brom, your clan is out of food. I've got the potatoes on my farm. You're either going to come, we're going to negotiate and share, and you're going to trade me something for them, or you're going to kill us for them because you're going to starve. Those kind of battles, those would happen naturally, either weather or loss of bison or deer. You know what I mean? Like those are going to happen in
organic way.
That's super decentralized, right? But
yeah,
people are going to understand that there's no wars but bankers' wars, right? Yeah. And you can take that further. The banks have centralized every aspect. There's 6 owners of all the media globally. There's 8 food companies globally. There's 10 pharmaceutical companies globally. There's maybe 16, 18 energy companies, right? And then the shareholders are whom? BlackRock, Vanguard. And that's not possible without a corrupt centralized monetary system. And then further, your government can't say, we're importing rapists and murderers. We're sending money through Ukraine to launder back to ourselves. Like, they wouldn't be able to do that against you.
Yes. So it's a way to protect yourself also.
Yeah, and so that your time isn't spent wasted thinking about these yahoos. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, they might be Luciferian, they might be greedy, incompetent, whatever their reason is behind doing it, doesn't really matter. The system is set up for the extraction from us.
And so how would you describe the how Bitcoin challenges like the traditional finance system and that centralized control? Like, what are for you the core?
It doesn't challenge it, it upends it.
Like slowly over time, you mean?
No,
just because it exists?
Slowly over time is the human element of it. Like, on its face, day one, January 9th, 2009,
just because it exists, you mean? As what I said, as like the mirror, like this is a different thing and it exists.
Right. Here is a perfect technological construction of a finite, fungible, transactable, permissionless, trustless store of value. Use with it what you will, humans.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yes. Every time I hear someone say something like that, I'm like, yeah, that is it. And I think that is why this is also so hard, because I asked the question and I wrap myself up in the questioning, whereas the answer is actually very simple. I think Bitcoin as a thing is a really dumb, simple thing, right?
It's actually extraordinarily easy to understand.
Yes. But its place in the world, why it should exist, everything, what is the value of everything that emanates from this combination of technologies, that is, I think, what we've been talking about, right? Like those things are very hard to understand. And that's also why it's so paradoxical that you can just move and adopt this very simplistic code base, basically.
And that, like, from a position of gratitude, right? At a bare minimum, we should be super grateful that is, number one, an option, and 2, is an apparatus for good where the collective community, right? I've been to every Bitcoin conference in the United States since inception. That's a radical group of people who you want to hang out with, break bread with, have a beer with, and then probably more importantly, go to war with against your enemy. Right? Because ultimately, maybe it's not a physical one, but it's certainly a spiritual one, and it's certainly a philosophical one, and it's definitely an economic one. So we need to be in join with our brothers and sisters who believe in this and want to see a better life for their kids. Because at this point, for you and I'm a millennial too. We're in our latter part of our best years, right? This is for the future generations.
Yes. That's exactly what I thought when I decided to start the podcast. Like, okay, I'm going to spend the rest of my life on this. I'm not
think
going to pay
if
attention.
The German citizens in the Weimar Republic had this as an option, or the French citizens in the First French Revolution had this for the franc, or the British citizens at any time between 1670 and 1840 had that, because they just dropped purchasing power forever. And then, oh, wait, World War II, Bretton Woods comes out. Oh, sorry, Britain, U.S. now gets reserve currency. Sterling drops, I think, 21% in a day. So no one's even had the out or the hedge.
Yes. Again, I also think that's why it's hard to understand that people don't realize that there's actually a thing, right? Like that's the whole think about, the zero-sum fiat brain. It's also the comments we see online, about Bitcoin comments.
Let's be honest, Bram. Like in a non-fiat world, the population would be a lot smaller.
You think so? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because when we earlier talked, I thought about Idiocracy. You've seen that movie?
Yeah. That was in 2007. Right?
Yeah, that's wild.
And think of the degree with which we are worse than that movie. People covered their face to deprive themselves of oxygen, took poisons, and sign up to eat poison. Like this is to me like the nihilist part of me. It's already gone, and we barely have any hope. Because I don't see how you're going to, if people aren't awake now, when are they ever going to be awoke?
That's a very good point. So how
historically, it takes 8 to 9% of the population to achieve a successful revolution / rebellion. So we don't need everyone, but we need at least that.
I had a guest on. I'm googling, but I think the French Revolution was like under 3% or something like a very, very low percentage of people that actually
physically
2%. Yeah, interesting. And that shows you also how fragile the current system is. So while a lot of people are like it's strong, but it's also it's constructed with it's just beliefs, basically programmed beliefs or something, right? Like there's nothing physical. Like I'm thinking how to say this. Like it's not that the people 100 years ago are like physiologically different than us or something. So it's literally the enchantment or the spell or just the belief that
well, they were a lot healthier than we are physically.
Yeah, so that probably helps.
So there is that.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, a great example that I think most people understand, right? At this point, people get that the mainstream media is fed their narratives through the globalists, whether it's CIA, MI6, Mossad, whatever the hell. They're given it. You've seen the montages of videos where all over the planet,
that's wild,
local news reporters in Australia and Germany and New Zealand and the United States and every state in the United States say the same literal lines, right? So we understand that that's fake news. The truth has gone to True Social, Twitter, X, etc., right? Decentralized media representatives like yourself, Bram, right? People are choosing to find truth because they know truth can be here, but there's still CBS, NBC, Bloomberg News, BBC. These are these apparatuses that people know are fake, know lie to them, know have an agenda, yet they still exist. So I think that's a very good example of the facade continuing because it's going to be funded by these dark overlords no matter what. We're just opting out and look at what's happening. Europe, United States, they're trying to not allow you to opt out, and you're not allowed to have free speech.
Do you feel like that pendulum hit like an end, and we're slowly going the other way, or are we still on the way to the furthest point of the
I can't speak for Europe because I'm much more empathetic and sympathetic to the degree with which it appears to be lost, in my opinion. I can speak for the South. There's no way in hell the South is going back. And like I include kind of Mexico and Central America in that as well. Like our economies in the Gulf of Mexico region, Pacific and Southern Atlantic are very, very, sugar cane from the Caribbean and Florida. You've got just these trade routes that are really intertwined. We produce the majority of the energy right out of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, the Gulf of Mexico, right off Florida. Like that part of the world doesn't need anything. All the fruit, right, whether it's Mexico or Costa Rica or Florida, it's all right here. And I think that we didn't have COVID in Florida. I don't know if you know that or not. No one wore masks. No one got shots. Like it just didn't exist. So I think that that's never going to turn back. I don't know what's going to take in China. I think you've seen some rebellion in South Korea. Japan, same thing, needs a full rebellion in their system. But I feel really most empathetic for the Europeans and the Chinese, because the Chinese don't even get to vote their way out of this, right?
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
Like, wait, what?
Yeah,
we've king made another emperor? Are you kidding me? Like, what is going on?
But yeah, okay. So when you say that, I think like, yes, I agree. And then my immediate next thought is, but we rely so heavily on China. It's crazy. Just communication, the semblance, like the battery technology. I don't know, like everything.
So if it flips off, what happens?
In Europe, more fucked than the US.
But what does that even mean?
Yeah, I don't know. That probably is some sort of war or strife. When you mean
Why?
In Europe?
Why? No, I know
think
what you're getting at. I'm just not going to feed it to you. I want you to think about it.
Yeah, well, I think it's gonna. In the beginning, we talked about like forced trust, etc. For me, I feel like the original idea of the EU, like just being like a trade bloc together, is a great idea. Free trade, whatever, as a bloc, but a forced political union and a forced monetary union. I feel
bureaucratic officials.
It's a very bad idea, and you see it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So I think
the UK is a travesty. It's an absolute travesty.
Yeah. I don't know why that went so quickly there now, especially in like the past few weeks since we're recording this today. But just in general, what I just said about Europe, I don't feel like that's my opinion. I think that's just a radical, a rational thought, maybe radical. If something is a bad idea or a bad construct or has a bad foundation, you should just say it, and you should make a conscious decision whether you continue with it or not. And if you continue with it, you should acknowledge that it's flawed, but I'm still continuing with it, so that it becomes more transparent when the cracks start to show. But the entire unity that they show in the EU, I don't think is there, and I think that would be a good thing. I mean, I've traveled on the East Coast of America. People in Florida are different than the people in South Carolina, North Carolina. Like that is great. That is amazing, and I think that. That enhances a culture, same as in Europe. But you cannot say that I'm the same as a French guy or an Italian guy or whatever, because I'm not. But
right,
in this forced political union, it's all put together. And
instead of thinking it along the ethnic divide and conquer lines that they try and force on people, back out and do it from a nationalistic standpoint. It's important for the world to have French culture, German culture, Italian culture, Spanish culture, British, English culture, Irish culture, North Carolina culture, Louisiana, right? Because the reason those colloquial differences exist is because of a population's drive for harmony and the interactions and creativity and solutions provided. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's almost like a song that gets written over time, right? And everyone should appreciate all of those attributes. There's only a few cultures that are obviously super barbaric and violent and not accretive to the planet, and they've been the ones that have been that for thousands of years, right? So I think it's really whether the West itself chooses to take this on and eliminate it.
Yeah.
And it's all, we're all Indo-European, and Mexicans that aren't mestizo or Native American, right, are Indo-European bloodlines. They may be from Spain or whatever. We just have to decide collectively, all right, we're going to get rid of the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve. Bye-bye, y'all are gone. And as a result, Japan and China and, everybody else will find a new mode of negotiation.
Is this why what makes Bitcoin also such a big idea for you? This
it's not an idea. It's actually the expression of an idea in a technological commodity. What I like is the existence of the apparatus itself.
Yeah. I love how you made that better, because I agree fully with you. It's a manifested idea in that
Correct.
sense. But like why I wanted to ask it, like, it makes it so big. Like, I have to think of something you said before. Like, this is the first time that we actually have a tool that anyone could adopt, that is not going away. Once people do the research, you will see this cannot be banned. This cannot be, like, it's never going away. So it exists, and because it exists, it shows you that it can be of value to you, and you can adopt it. I think that is what I wanted to ask. Like, is that why it's such a big thing? The fact that we actually have it.
Mm-hmm. Then you had bans, like effectively the Biden administration as a small business operator, horrible. Like the communist regime that is the Democratic Party was horrible for small businesses. Hundreds of thousands of them closed from 2020 to 2024 because of the Biden administration and their apparatus. Then you had a obvious anti-crypto agenda. I mean, Senator Warren called it the anti-crypto army, right? And then you had Choke Point 2.0. Like, so you've had active bans, an actual ban in China. And then the MiCA legislation in Europe on the surface looks like it's good for blockchain development, but it's horrible for actual long-term investment, right? What they just did to Tether is insane. And it should show you people who do not want free and fair competition cannot be trusted, period. If you want to delist something or not allow something, whether it's a book or a potato chip, like, I just want the choice. I can buy the processed food one that is addictive and I'm addicted to it, or I want the organic one that has no, we just want the marketplace to deliver those products and solutions to us. We'll decide on the price of them, and there'll be competition.
It's so there's so much hubris in being like, okay, I lead a country and I decide for you, and any idea that threatens my ideas is extremist in whatever way, left, right, whatever. However,
and that's the only nomenclature with which they have to describe it.
Yeah, because if you would, I love this topic, because if you would appreciate true freedom as many portray, there would be a total freedom of ideas. Eventually, the entire world is a battleground of ideas. Anything it comes from the metaphysical, as in it was an idea before, and now
periods with which that existed, right?
Yeah.
Most recently, 1776 through 1863, and then you could argue up to 1913. But before that, do you know when it was? The Enlightenment and Renaissance.
The Renaissance, I would.
Do you want to know what is the best, what the historical examples of that was primarily destroyed in World War I and World War II? The epic, beautiful architecture that was birthed during the Enlightenment and Renaissance periods. The cathedrals themselves, right, which are frequency healing centers before they were churches, right? I mean, if people want to get real deep on that, I can.
Where are all the bells?
Yeah, and then yeah, exactly. Well, and then the pipe organs, right, which are still tuned to 432, which is the God frequency, versus 440, which is the satanic frequency, or cult frequency, depending on your nomenclature. Like it shows you what can happen and how fast GDP. I mean, even like I'll pick on an example people love to hate on. Do you know why Hitler was on the cover of Time magazine?
Why he was on the cover of Time magazine? I don't know. Was that connected to him imprisoning no? Okay.
No. Well, first off, he only imprisoned communists. Whether they identified as other people was a whole other discussion I don't want to have. But what we can agree on that's a positive that people don't like when you point out a positive of a negative person is the economic miracle that was created between 1933 and 1938.
Is that why he was on the cover?
Yep.
That's
and if you look up German economic miracle and actually study from the writers of the time, the economists and the practitioners, you look at what happened. It was a weird hybrid of nationalistic decentralization. Now they were decentralizing from the very same system we have today, nationalizing it, creating what the counterpart, which he even cited, which was Lincoln, Greenback, and then John F. Kennedy actually did this as well, as $5 bills in circulation. There was 16 million of them in the 1960s. He was then killed for that, right? Value-based currency, not debt-based currency. And then incentivized housing, single-family formation. Throughout all of history, new household formations, the number one attribute of a growing GDP.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense.
And so you can say whatever you want about whatever happened during that period. I'm not here to debate that. I'm just pointing out some highlights that was, okay, he did these couple things where the government did these few things, and look at what happened.
So how does it come then when this is a good idea, or this period you mentioned in America? How does that then get hijacked? What happens? Why is there an opportunity to actually corrupt something that creates all this beauty and free market, etc.? How did that came about?
The globalists came over and took it over slowly, right? Like they took over the bank, 1913. Then they took over the pharmaceutical system, energy system, and then in the 50s, the education system.
Okay, but I mean more like, how do people that are, let's say, really free, somewhat enlightened, why would they allow these bad ideas to win? Well,
as John Adams, I'm sorry, I think it might have actually been Ben Franklin, a republic if you can keep it. What did they all say? Freedom is for a moral people. You cannot hold these universal truths and these natural laws to high regard if you are an immoral person. And so what has occurred is that the effectiveness of corrupting means of production, the means of value, and then the incentives where, okay, you go from, wait, I need the 16th iPhone, right? Versus I don't need a cell phone. But my kids are the only kids in their entire school that don't have cell phones. Now, the reason I don't give them cell phones is because the EMF radiation is insane, and there's countless studies of how provably harmful this stuff is, and I'm not going to handicap my kids' fertility ability by giving them an electronic device that's going to harm them. And then the other is that I don't want them to be ineffective communicators between both sexes.
I feel like that opens up a whole different conversation.
But they're all correlated.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think here, what I like to do is just foster more rebellion. It's you don't have to listen to any outside influences. No one can tell you you're racist or you're stupid or you're fat or, everything you can internalize, and you need to take personal responsibility for it. Society doesn't owe anybody anything.
Yes.
Except for freedom. There should be no taxes. There should be no healthcare systems. There should be no welfare systems. No, all of that is an illusion so that we're controlled.
I want to be mindful of your time, but I think 3 short questions to wrap it up. So if Bitcoin is this mirror and it has value because it still exists and people can move over, and it's this grassroots adoption and it brings us these property rights and with that the freedom, how do you look at traditional finance adopting Bitcoin? Is that like a Trojan horse, or is that
Could be.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really have a technological Trojan horse. The way I would describe the version I think you're articulating, or at least alluding to, is that it's usurping the narrative from currency to store value and making it just potentially a speculative instrument and store value like gold. And who am I to decide? I don't operate from a position of hubris, right? It's up to humans to decide. I want this to be used as currency, especially for B2B. But whether or not that's one of the features of it in the future, that's, again, not up to me. What I have realized as I've gotten older is that human beings cannot help themselves but to over-financialize everything, right? And so, like, the way I would argue a positive is that there are ETFs for the euro, the dollar, the yen, the renminbi, right? That doesn't mean it's automatically a bad thing for the future of the use cases. Do I like it? Absolutely not. Does BlackRock own the Bitcoin? I mean, you can ask all the questions you want. I'm not here to resolve or solve any of those for you. I'm just saying, no, I don't like it. No, I don't participate in it. None of my accounts will ever own a Bitcoin ETF. That is a second derivative at best. So all of those Wall Street issuers could go fuck themselves.
I love that. Yeah, no, I meant it more as a Trojan horse, as like Bitcoin is the Trojan horse, not the other way around. As in, like, they adopt it based on greed, right? They want to participate, or there's this new thing, or they want to manipulate it, or whatever the motivation is.
You just said they want to manipulate it.
Probably, but I do think that when I look at the properties of Bitcoin, or to go back to perhaps the ideas that we talked about in maybe the Austrian ideas, or just the more like the rationale, the organic choice of people that, yeah, we can already copy Bitcoin 10,000 times. We can do that tomorrow, right? But there's only one that is this one. And so I feel that they want Bitcoin because they're greedy and they want to make money, whatever their definition of money is.
No,
but
it's not that, because they can print the money.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so it's not that.
Yeah.
It's something else.
Would that be, okay.
Control and manipulation. That's the only answer, dude.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So my positive thought with that is that the principles and values that emanate from Bitcoin will eventually, over time, hopefully, I don't know if hope is a strategy.
It is.
Yeah, align people in a better way, and so they will not go along with these malicious practices, because eventually, if you adopt Bitcoin and you follow the rules of Bitcoin because everyone is following the rules of Bitcoin, then you will understand eventually, again, over time with education, etc., that this is a mutually beneficial game and not a zero-sum game.
The great thing is that the choice is obvious.
Yes.
So I think that we've got more irons in the fire for that to be the case. But certainly, dude, hope is a strategy, because positive vibrations, I quote the Beach Boys, right? Like good karma, high resonant frequency is the best way to combat anything.
I 100% agree. So I love that you said
it's actually more effective than the sword and the pen.
Yes, I agree. So what kind of positive outlook does Bitcoin give you for, let's say, the next 10 years?
That we got a shot. I mean, very, very selfishly, I would love it to come down to a battle. Like, so I will articulate and self-disclose. There is an incredible amount of like rage that I harbor for bearing witness to what has happened to humanity from '08 to now. And I started in finance in '06, and I got to witness effectively the full bastard. You know, it was already horrible from 1939, but the full usurping of anything free, anything price discovery, anything not manipulated is all gone, right? There's no real stock market. There's no real bond market. You had, for the very first time, the public's money effectively being used to prop up bonds and lower force interest. All that stuff was just a brutal weaponization against humanity. That because we know these people are cowards, they're weak, they're low T, they're SDE, all of that above. Like, I want the alphas of the planet, and I'm just a quant nerd, not considering myself an alpha, to just go to battle, right? Physically, because we would win in 30 minutes. And we greatly outnumber all of them. There's 8 billion of us and a few thousand of them.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting thought, and I also love the idea that you need a very small percentage of people that actually.
Well, and honestly, I'm impatient. I'm tired of waiting.
Yeah.
I don't want my kids. So, like, if it's, hey, Chris, you can fight. Maybe you take out 20 of them, but you're going to die. Sweet, sign me up. I'm not kidding, and that's just a kind of a selfish indulgence, because the process of upending this is going to take longer.
Yeah.
And they won't be men and actually face us.
I don't know if that's the positive note that I wanted to end upon, but I think I definitely agree. I see this as a huge battle. It is a spiritual battle, and it is a huge battle. And I hope that you doing what you do and me doing this podcast, we can have a little contribution to hopefully, a wider awakening to the fact that we are more subject in a system than an actual actor in a system, and that it's not designed for us.
Well, Bram, I'm super stoked for the opportunity to talk with you. And then I did want to let people know further, like, why I gave that self-indulgence and that show of weakness there, and the admission of rage, is to show people they don't have to be afraid. Like, fear and weaponization of the mind is how they get us, and that, like, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to learn from them and move on. But, like, one person is the problem here, right? Yeah. So we all have to remember that forgiveness is divine. Bootstraps on, bottom up, and try and bring everyone up with us. And part of the way to do that is to show weakness and admit fault, because no one's perfect.
Maybe this is your answer to my last question, because my last question is something that I ask everyone, which is, what is a core belief that you will never let go?
Rebellion to tyrants is honor to God.
Wow. Love that, man. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. And I really enjoyed this conversation. And yeah, man, let's do it again sometime. Thank you.
My pleasure, buddy. Thank you.
Cheers.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, please like this video if you want to help shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, and subscribe to my channel to stay connected. I hope to see you for a next episode. Bye.